the volume of blueberries, wild, low bush blueberries. And it's significant to the history of this vicinity. I'll tell you more about it coming back down. Look over this mountain here, and you can see the hills of Camden, Maine off in the distance. They're about 70 miles away. It takes an especially clear day to be able to see those. And I don't think we're going to see Mount Katahdin. It's a little too fuzzy over there, but it's off to the left about 100 miles.
Too much moisture in the air.
Too much moisture. Now this park has about 150 miles of hiking trails in it. That and bicycling is the most popular thing to do on this island and in this park. One of those is right here on our left. I see somebody on it right there. That's called the North Ridge of Cadillac. There's somebody in front of us coming down the mountain. And when we come down, I'm going to stop briefly and show you where that starts. Some of you may want to get off and take that climb up and down. And you're welcome to do so.
Go ahead and climb back down.
Yeah. You couldn't hitchhike. Hard to get a ride though.
We might make it to the boat.
That mountain on the right, which we looked at a minute ago, is easier to see now. And that's the second highest point on this island. That one's named Sergeant Mountain, but to get to the top of that one, you got to go onto your own power. There are no roads, except on the lower part where some people live on the other side. And look at the base of it on the right, you can see some water. It looks like another lake or pond. But that, folks, is part of the Atlantic Ocean up here in the middle of part of this island. That's the head of a body of water you see on the map. It's called Somes Sound. And that too was carved out by the glacier, but instead of enclosing it like it did these others, it left that one open to the ocean, so it filled with seawater. And I was just in Glacier Bay in Alaska just a few weeks ago, and that is the same thing, except on a much, much larger scale. We went all the way up to the end of it on the cruise ship. Parked up there for a little while and looked at some glaciers. Well, we don't have any glaciers. Thank God. We don't need it. But it's interesting that that thing runs the length of that mountain. It's about 7 miles long. And if you look at about 1 o'clock, you see where the two mountains run together. They form a V. Right in the bottom of the V is the mouth of the sound. So that's where the ocean starts into the sound. And if you look over that, the land just on the other side of the mouth of the sound is made up of Southwest Harbor, Bass Harbor, and Bernard. And offshore, a few miles, you see a high island offshore there that is named High Island in French, Isle Ho. That was also named by Champlain when he was here in 1604. The park owns about half of that island. These islands right below us are the Cranberries. And they're the ones shown on the face of the map, you know, on the picture. And that picture was taken from right in here somewhere on a cloudy day. And those are inhabited by people year round, but accessed only by boat. The long, slender one closest to us is named golly, it's just escaped me. Look on the map and tell me what his name is.
What is it you were looking for?
The long, slender one closest to us.
Oh, what do we got?
We got a little cranberry, big cranberry,
Big cranberry.
and then the other one.
We got Baker is near out there.
That's another one.
Oh,
The
man.
big one was named for an Englishman who bought it from the Indians, and I can't tell you his name.
I can't either.
I'm having a senior moment, folks. Pardon me.
You'll remember it on the way back down.
Yeah, I had to remember the name of that radio manufacturer. Yeah. What the heck was his name? No, it was not that well known. He had a pretty good radio, but and it compared with Philco and RCA and all those, but it wasn't that. No. I Apparently we don't have any radio collectors. Every day and there has somebody, he names them in front of Heartbeat. Well, folks, we've almost reached the parking area, and we'll be able to park pretty close to the restroom, because we'll be able to pull in this space right over here on the left. But I got to make a big wide circle to get to it. And the restrooms and the little shop are right here on the right. If you're interested. Now, we'll be up here 15 minutes, and if you will, check your watch when you get off and make sure to get back in 15. You know the difference between a trolley tourist in Acadia Park and a hitchhiker? About 2 minutes. Up to the right there, you see a high point on the mountain. That's the best view that you can have up here. And I got to park a long ways from that. But over here to the right, you're looking down on the village of Bar Harbor, your ship, and the Porcupine Islands. Unfortunately, they make us do this. If I don't park down here, the ranger will be in here making me move anyway. So. Okay, folks, let's see. I have 11:10. So if you plan on being back, absolute no later than 11:30. You know, by the time everybody gets off, it's going to be close to 11:15. It's also a little weather sensor of some sort up there. That's the highest point on the mountain over there. And he put that hotel there. It wasn't very big. He called it the Green Mountain Summit House. And another man from Bangor decided a cog railway made sense, so he built that and ran it from Eagle Lake up to the hotel. And he called that the Green Mountain Railway. Original. Well, neither one of them did very well. They failed to make a profit over a period of time, not too long. And they closed the hotel and tore the building down. And he took out he didn't take the tracks out of the railway, he left them on the mountain. But he took the two steam engines, which had been built for him in Manchester, New Hampshire in 1880, and he sold them to the man running a similar cog railway on Mount Washington in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. And one of those is at the base of the mountain today as a museum piece. The other one is still taking people up that mountain, built in 1880. He makes one trip a day with it, and the rest of the time he has a biodiesel engine. But it started over here, the old one here. Thank you, no. Folks, look down the left, you see a little inlet down there. It's called Seal Harbor. At about 10 o'clock. And that's where the greatest concentration of summer wealth is located on this island today. That place is loaded with some huge, huge properties. Some of the people who own them, you might be familiar with their names. One of them is the producer of Law and Order.
Really?
Yeah. What's your name? Dick something? Wolf. Dick Wolf. Thank you.
Mr. Wolf.
By the way, Atwater Kent was the guy's name for the radios. Oh, okay. Atwater Kent. And that island back there that I couldn't remember the name of was named Sutton. They named it for the guy who bought it from the Indians for 2 quarts of rum. He said he gave him a birch bark deed, and then they expected to get it back because they thought they'd only lent it to him. I guess that's where the term Indian giver originated. But another person who has a place down there is Martha Stewart. You might know that name. Her cottage is in Seal Cove area. Seal Harbor area, excuse me. Now the mountain was sold by the owner who had built the hotel to George Dorr in about 1900. And he ultimately gave it to the park when it had become a park. He donated it to him. And they changed the name to Cadillac because it was more significant. You see, there was a Frenchman named Antoine de la Motte Cadillac who had been in the Acadian Army in the 1600s. He helped Frontenac in the fighting in Quebec City. And the governor of the province of Quebec had awarded him a land grant which included Mount Desert Island. That was confirmed by King Louis XIV in 1687. That same year he came here and spent his honeymoon at Hull's Cove, close to where we came in the park. But he was here a very short time before going back into Quebec, and he's credited with establishing the fur trade in North America. He's also the founder of a little city over in the Midwest, which he called Fort Detroit. And we call it Detroit, Michigan. He was later to become the governor of Louisiana. Well, Cadillac wasn't even his real name. It was actually Lomé, and his father was a small-town lawyer. He was not from royalty, but his father was at the royal court. So he was associated with royalty as a young man. But he thought he should have been from royalty, so he took the name Cadillac because he liked it better than Lomé. Thought it sounded more regal, I guess. It does kind of sound that way. But he didn't have a family crest, so he designed his own. And that's the one that Cadillac adopted when they named the car for him. They took that as the emblem on the car, and they've been using it ever since. Except they've modified it several times over the years. Folks, could you see the sandbar now?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
By the time we get back, if any of you want to walk out there, you'll be able to do it, I'm sure.
How far is it?
Well, it's only a couple of blocks from where we parked the trolley. And then it's about a block down to the bar.
But I mean, how long is it?
Oh, how long is the bar?
Yeah.
Well, I don't really know how far it is across there. I'd say it's a couple of 100 yards, but you don't have to go all the way across. You can see a lot of things back on this shore to the left of it when you get on it that you can't see any other way.
So it'd only be about 5-minute walk.
Yeah, about 5-10 minutes. Mm-hmm. If you notice, there's some buildings down at the bottom of the mountain here at the back of us at about 3 or 4 o'clock that look like a factory, but they're actually a research lab, folks. That's Jackson Laboratory, and they specialize in cancer and genetics. And they also breed laboratory mice. And they keep about 1 million of them in the mouse house at all times for shipment every day.
The mouse house.
I hope the heck they never get out of there one time. But they burned in the fire. They lost all that in the fire. They lost all their mice. Except for a few that was sterile, I understand. So they had to crank up again with, and if they had started from scratch like they did in the beginning, it would have taken them years. But fortunately, the labs around the world heard about their plight, and they sent mice back to them that they hadn't yet used. So they were able to get cranked up again with the same strains of mice, genetically introduced genes over the years, and they were able to get cranked up again. So now they're going full steam. They built another mouse house on the West Coast.
They did.
Yeah, you probably heard of it, Disneyland? No, it's up near Sacramento somewhere.
Mickey runs that.
Yeah. There's a breakwater down there between us and that little island behind the cruise ship. That's called Bald Porcupine Island. It was called that back when it was bald. It didn't have any trees on it. And that breakwater was built at the behest of J.P. Morgan. When he was here, he didn't have a place here. He had a ship, a pretty good sized cruise vessel, and he would park in that little harbor there at the end of that breakwater. And when the tide changed, the current was a little bit too much for him. At dinner time, it would, make the glass of the drink slide around on the table and all. So he convinced the Corps of Engineers to build that breakwater. They say it cost about $1 million back in those days. And he convinced them that it would help protect the harbor, but it really doesn't, because the islands do that. That harbor stays pretty calm most of the time. if you can imagine the railway starting right down below us here. And there's a little island down there. Some of you can probably see that when I stop. A little tiny island on this side. And that's where it started. And it came straight up this mountain to that ridge we just left and made one turn on that ridge and went straight on up to the hotel. And some of you might be able to see that tower up in front of us. It's off to the left there a little bit. We look to the left of the trolley here now, level pretty much with me. And you see 3 iron stakes that are still embedded in that granite over there, just off the edge of that little cliff. That was part of the railroad bed. And that's the last sign that was ever on this mountain. George Dorr is the guy who took the rails off at his expense once he bought the mountain. He said he didn't like those rails on this mountain. It was defacing the mountain, and he said nothing like that would ever be on this mountain again. And then, of course, he gave it to the park. Now, you know, I said something about Acadia, the Acadian army and all that. Well, the French call all this area Acadia, but in French that was Acadie. And we translated that into English as Acadia. But it originally started out by having a man who was doing some exploring for the French. He was Italian. He came over here in the 1500s and went up and down this coast and mapped and explored it for the French. And he told them that he thought he was looking at a Greek province known as Arcadia. So he told them that, and they said, okay, we'll call it that, but it's Acadie in French. So they called all of this territory from roughly that blue hill over there up into the provinces of Canada. And all of that was known as Acadie or Acadia, because they never extended their presence any further than that mountain, that little mountain over there, Blue Hill. Everything on the other side of that initially was occupied by the Dutch. And it wasn't long after that that the British came in and took it away from them. So that's why the park is not named Arcadia, but it's named Acadia, without an R. And I think it's very appropriately named, being located exactly where it is. It's also reminiscent of a poet who was a native of Portland, Maine. His name was Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. And Longfellow was a professor of language arts at Harvard for many years, but he also wrote quite a bit of poetry, as you know. And one of his better known epic poems he entitled Evangeline, the tale of Acadie and the primeval forest. And I don't know about you, but I had to read that thing in high school, and I thought I'd die. I think it was the most boring thing I ever did read, but now that I'm a little bit older and more mature, I can accept the fact that he was telling a story in his own inimitable way of Evangeline, who was in search of her long-lost lover. She was one of many Acadians who were kicked out of Nova Scotia. And it was a pretty tragic situation for those people who had settled there after having originally settled on St. Croix Island under Champlain. The second year they moved over to Nova Scotia, to a place that they named Port Royal. And they grew to a sizable community, and then the King of England, George, was upset because he thought they would be subversive to his efforts, and he wanted them out of there. So he asked them to swear an oath of allegiance to his crown, and they didn't do that, so he kicked them out. Well, those people wound up spreading themselves all over the place. Well, he did. Many of them wound up in Quebec and Ontario, as well as New Brunswick. Some of them stayed in Nova Scotia, never left. Some of them wound up in Virginia, Maryland, Delaware. But the vast bulk of them found their way down to the last French-speaking bastion in this country, which was the southern Louisiana area. And today the descendants of those French Acadians call themselves Cajuns. And when they left that area, they liked lobster as much as anybody, and they decided that they weren't going to get that lobster in that water down there, so they took a whole boatload of them with them. And they managed to survive the trip. But you know, they dehydrated. They shrank up so badly that today the descendants of those Maine lobsters, they call them crawfish.
Well, that's how it happened.
And that was told to me by a Cajun, so I take it to be the gospel truth.
Takes a lot of those to make a lobster roll.
Well, I mean, to tell you, I don't know how many it would take, probably 50 to make a decent lobster roll. Speaking of lobster rolls, if anybody's interested in one, there's a little place in the village of Bar Harbor that serves a mighty fine lobster roll for $10.99. And it's called the Dog and Pony. And Craig up here has a Dog and Pony t-shirt, I mean a hoodie on.
Yeah, which I didn't mean to wear today.
It's alright.
Okay.
I'll tell them about Dog and Pony anyway.
Yeah, no, it's a great place. It is.
I mean, it's just a local tavern. And we have other food, but the lobster roll is something else for $10.99. You can't beat it in town now.
Probably the best deal in town.
Most places you get about $14.95 or $15 or maybe even more for a lobster roll. Well, this island has had quite a history since Cadillac was here. Back just before the revolution started, there was a land grant given to the governor of Massachusetts. See, this was part of the colony Massachusetts. And he was given a land grant, but it only included the western half of the island, everything on the other side of Stone Sound. And his name was Sir Francis Bernard. And he came up here in those years just prior to the revolution. He was very unpopular governor because he supported the king, King George, and all his taxes that he had levied, and he was trying to collect them, and he was trying to cut out the meetings that these guys were having to discuss the possibility of what they were going to do with the king, you know. So he'd break up those meetings. So he was a very unpopular guy, but he did get this award of a land grant because he'd done the treaty that established Maine as part of the colony of Massachusetts rather than becoming part of Nova Scotia. He was a lawyer. So he came up here and sold a lot of property. There's a little village on the other side of the island. I mentioned it on the way up the mountain called Bernard, named for him. His son inherited that land grant, and he came up and sold some property as well. Now you remember I said I'd show you the start of that trail up the mountain? This is where it starts, right here where this sign is. Doesn't that look inviting?
Oh, tough.
See that the park has been very, very generous. They put 3 steps right there to get you started. The rest of it, you're on your own. Folks, you realize that almost every 2 or 3 minutes there's another view. That's thanks to John D. He's the one who decided this road would be where it is. And he did that because of the vegetables. He'd walked these woods. He'd walked all over this whole island, I understand. It's hard to believe. Frustrated road builder. Well, about the time that most of the states had signed on to the Constitution, a woman named Maria Theresa de Gregoire and her husband Bartholomew sailed over to Boston from France, and she petitioned the courts to award her this half of the island, knowing that Bernard had the other half. And why would she do that? Well, she was the granddaughter of Cadillac, and he had left her his land grant in his will. The only problem was that that land grant was 100 years old when it was French. And here she was asking the United States to honor it. Legally, it didn't make any sense. But, you know, influence got you something then just like it does now. So she was pretty influential. She had some friends who wrote letters to the courts and pleaded with them to award her this half of the island. One of them was Benjamin Franklin, and another one was Thomas Jefferson, and another one was the Marquis de Lafayette, who was a very popular guy, you know, having been the man to accept the surrender of Cornwallis at Yorktown, Virginia, to end the war. So she came here in about 1787, about 100 years after her grandfather had gotten his land grant. And they settled in none other than Hull's Cove, where he had spent his honeymoon. And they sold land. They had a surveyor lay it out in little 100-acre parcels, rectangular shape, running from the ocean inland. And they sold those for $5 each, which sounds like a pittance, but back then that was quite a bit of money. You know, a revolutionary soldier was lucky to get $5 a month serving in the army. So they became quite well to do, but they died virtual paupers. I don't know what happened to the money, but they lost it all. Probably put it in a lottery.
Scratch off.
Yeah, right, scratch off ticket. But they're both buried in Hall's Cove in a little cemetery over there. And the only thing marking their graves is a boulder. There's no headstone. There are a lot of boulders over there marking graves. Did you notice a golf course when you're on the mountain looking down this way?
Yes.
Well, that's not in the park, but it looks like it is, because there's the 10th hole right there through these trees, the white flag. It looks like it's in the park, but it's not. It is a private course. It is open to the public. It was established in 1888. It's the 8th oldest golf course in the United States. And here's the interesting thing. The clubhouse is about 1.5 miles off to the left. And here's the 10th hole right here. Well, for those of you who know golf, that's called a links course. That's one of the characteristics. That you don't bring the 9th hole back into the clubhouse and come back out on 10. It just keeps on going out here. So 9 is over to the left, in front of us and to the left. But the park is right there. You can see a little path over there. That's a little hiking trail called a Great Meadow Loop, and we're going to see the Great Meadow in just a minute, which was some of the first property that became Acadia National Park ultimately. It was owned by Dorr, and among other acreage, and he and Charles Eliot, President Emeritus of Harvard, were concerned about what was happening in the late 1800s with all the building of cottages and what they ultimately thought about as condos. And they wanted to protect this land from any more private use. So they put together a land trust. And that was the first thing that started this thing in 1900. And that piece of property right out there and that mountain were in that initial gift to the trust. And this is a beaver area. It's grown up around the beaver lodges. There are 3 of them on the bank, on the back side of that dam, which when you can see the dirt at the end of the water line here, right off the side of the trolley, just behind that you see grass. That's a dam across there. And beyond that, on the right, you can see some white sticks at the bottom of a bush, and that's actually a beaver lodge there. It's got that big bush growing out of the top of it. And then 2 more beyond that. We'll see some others in a minute. Up close. I mean, clear.
Personal.
There's lupin. That really blooms like crazy in another week or so. A few years ago, the maintenance guy who takes care of the grounds, in charge of them, instructed one of his men to cut those lupin down because they weren't native to the island. And boy, did he ever catch it for doing that. The local people went berserk. And believe me, the local people have a lot to say about this park, since it takes up about half of the island. They listen very intently to locals. The guy almost lost his job, but being with the government, that's impossible.
Yeah. You're not supposed to kill the messenger, right? I mean, he didn't make the decision.
Yeah, he did. Not the guy who cut it, but the guy who made the decision.
Oh, the guy who made the decision.
The manager of the property. Yeah, he was really in hot water. Well, in a few years after they amassed a lot of gifts, they had a lot of people giving land to that trust. And it got to a point where Dorr and Elliott said, hey, we're not able to manage this land. We need the government involved. So they wanted the federal government to take it over and to make it into a national park. Well, they weren't interested. Congress had to pass a law for that to occur, and they said, no way, we've got too many other things to think about. World War I was about ready to start. Well, right after the war, he finally convinced Congress, and they did establish the thing in, I'm not exactly sure exactly what year it was, but it was somewhere in that 1900s, early. It became a national monument initially, and it was named Lafayette, after the Marquis de Lafayette. Excuse me, it was named Sierra de Mon National Monument, and about 3 years later it became National Park, and that was named Lafayette National Park. The name was changed to Acadia because it was more significant historically, according to Dorr. In 1929, it became Acadia. And this is Sierra Mon Springs and the Wild Gardens of Acadia. The gardens were established in 1961 by the Garden Club of Bar Harbor, and they're off to the right, and in there they have established several different configurations of different atmospheres of venues of plants, and they're all pretty well named. And off to the left is a very important building right over there in the bushes. And the Nature Center over here on the right has some displays in there that some of you might be interested in checking out. And again, this is a 15-minute stop, so if you would. And I know who had been helpful to Henry of Navarre in the French civil religious wars in the 16th century. And King Henry commissioned him to come over here and settle this colony, and in return, that man was to get the rights to all the trade here in this new world of Acadia. So he hired Champlain to come along, and that man got the title Sierra de Mon, the Lord of the Mountains, which is what this place we just left is named. It's kind of like a British knighthood. Well, when they settled those people and went on that trip down to Cape Cod, they got back to the island and found that about half those people had died while they were gone. So that's when they decided to move them to a less hostile atmosphere over in Nova Scotia. And that I mentioned earlier as being Port Royal. Today it's got another name. I'm not sure exactly what it is. I can't remember. recall, but that's when that group grew into a sizable community that was ultimately kicked out by King George in about 1755 or something like that. A lot of those people never did see one another again, you know. Families were separated and everything. And today there's an Acadian village near Lafayette, Louisiana. Lafayette is considered to be the capital of Acadiana, which is what the Cajuns call all that neighborhood that they live in down there. To this very day, they call it Acadiana. So now you know all you need to know about the Cajuns. Oh, you know all I know. That. If you look to the right, you'll see a couple of beaver lodges out in the pond that have been there for some time, and they're still active as I understand it from the park. And there's quite a bit of wildlife in those woods back there on the other side, but like I say, if there are any deer in there, most of them are laying down. And one day I was sitting here and I spotted an eagle sitting right on the top of that most distant one. He was right up on the peak of it, just waiting. Reminded me of a buzzard.
Waiting for the prey.
Yeah. Like two buzzards. You've seen that picture of the two buzzards.
Maybe.
On the caption on the one is patience. And the other says patience, hell, I'm gonna kill something.
I'm hungry.
And that's
yeah.
the eagle.
Yeah, that's
you know,
the eagle.
eagle's
Yeah.
a pretty nasty bird. They steal from the osprey. If it's an osprey, he's caught himself a fish and he's flying off, and the eagle spots him, he'll dive at him and he'll drop the fish and fly off. And the eagle will grab the fish in midair and fly off with it. Save a lot of effort that way. This pond used to flood this road periodically after some heavy rains. It was known to come up on the road back there in a low spot because of this beaver dam right here. And there's a dam that doesn't look like anything. But that's a beaver dam that the beavers built. What a feat of engineering. They say you can walk across that thing and it won't give an inch. Just solid as a rock. But a few years ago, they buried some PVC pipe under that dam to let the water keep moving. See, the beaver doesn't like moving water. If somebody breaks a place in that dam, he'll come over here and repair it right away. But as long as the water was flowing that slowly underneath, it didn't bother them. But it kept the water off the road. And it goes under this road and comes out over here, so the stream is still moving slightly over here. And there's a huge beaver lodge off to the left. At the end of what looks like the end of the water on the left, you can see that beaver lodge. You can't see it as well as you could a month ago. But that's the Bar Harbor Beaver Hotel over there. Look how huge it is. Great big wandering thing. And those buildings back there are the Jackson Ave that I mentioned from up on the mountain. We're on the backside. We'll be running right in front of them on the way back into town. So we will have pictured those people 3 times on this one little trip. I guess that's a signal as to how important they really are. Somebody said recently that in his judgment, and he is a scientist, in his judgment that this is perhaps the most likely place to ever reach a conclusion of solving the cancer problem, of actually curing cancer. He feels confident it will come from this laboratory. And you know, that's like a toss of the coin. If you notice off to the left, there's a lighthouse out in the harbor. Some of you may have seen it when you came in this morning. That's Egg Rock Light. And it's kind of hard to see it this time of day from here. Well, there's a little house out there with the light up on the top of the house. This is the other brick cottage down here at about 11 o'clock against the water. It's called High Seas. And that was built by a professor from Princeton University back in 1911 and 12. And he had been married and had a number of children, and his wife died at a pretty young age. He proposed to a young German lady who never did give him a definite answer. He told her he was going to build this place in Bar Harbor, and she took a cruise back to Germany. She didn't like cruises. She thought it was a very dangerous thing to do. But she convinced herself she needed to go back to Germany for a while, so she did. And then she heard about a ship that was going on a maiden voyage out of Southampton back to New York that was unsinkable. So she booked her passage on that, and she went down with it, the Titanic, and never got back here to see the house. And he never knew whether she was going to marry or not. Well, he sold it in about 1929, I think, to Mrs. Hawks from New York, and she was the owner when the fire came through here. We were right in the midst of the fire as it swept down this way, and it burned everything in its path except for that one building over there, thanks to the caretaker of Mrs. Hawks. Since she was dying in the hospital, she never knew about the fire, but he took it upon himself to get up there with some other people with some hoses and kept water pouring on it while the fire burned everything else around it, including the cottage that had belonged to Potter Palmer, the owner of the Palmer House Hotel in Chicago, as well as Mr. Pulitzer's house, which was over in there somewhere. That's the only reason that one was saved. And today that's owned by Jackson Lab. They use it as a dormitory primarily for their summer intern program. Up on this mountain to the right is a trail called the Precipice Trail, and that was built by Bruno, the man who built that house back there. And his brother-in-law fell off of that and died about 3 days later of injuries. It's a very difficult trail. Have you ever been on it?
Yeah, yeah.
It's not easy.
It's not. They've got the rungs, and you go straight up for a lot of the way.
Yeah, and the distance between the rungs, I understand, is so far that a young child can't generally make it.
No.
They can't reach them from one rung to the other. And there's a path that runs parallel to the road up back this way a little ways, about 3/4 of the way up the mountain. And it's got an old iron water pipe, about an inch water pipe as a rail. Right?
Yeah.
I've seen pictures of it, but I haven't been up there. And
It's been a while. It's been a while since I've been up.
I will not go up there.
Yeah.
I'm over that. There's some peregrine falcons that have been coming back to nest here in this place, up on that trail, near that trail. This would be their 18th season. I don't think they've showed up this year. I just read in the paper the other day that they haven't been able to spot any over here. We've got 3 other pairs on the island though, and one of them has three chicks that have just hatched. This one generally has been the most successful of all of them, but for some reason they're not back this year, so at least they're not back yet. But if they do come back, they have the trail closed in case they do come back, but if they're not back in another week or 10 days, I understand they're going to open the trail. That'll be the earliest it's ever opened. And we'll be going through an entrance gate up here. You probably wonder, where is the pay station for this park? Well, there isn't but one. All the different ways we can get in this park without paying. There must be 15 different entrances I could pick out without coming through this gate. But if you want to see Thunder Hole and or Sand Beach in a vehicle especially, then you got to come through here, because it is one way. Every now and then somebody gets on it going the wrong way. But not often. Hi, how are you? 34. Please. That's wonderful. Thank you. Okay, folks, now you're officially part of the census of Acadia National Park. By the way, anybody who's reached the golden age of 62 and is a citizen of the United States, you are eligible for a lifetime senior pass through the Department of Interior, which will admit you to any of the feed stations in the system, in the whole national park system, national monuments, etc. That's $10 for life. That's Best Buy in the United States. I lost mine this past winter. I came in the park a week or so ago, and the head ranger was there, Jane. And I said, Jane, I need another senior pass. She says, what happened to the other one? I said, I lost it. She said, oh, well, keep this one. I said, what's the big deal? $10, I got you. I said, how can you compare that to anything else for $10? It costs $40 to get into Grand Canyon Park in a car. But with that pass, you can go right in. And we can't go down there to that sand beach area. You can't see the beach from down there anyway. You'd have to get out and walk quite a ways. But you can see it from up here. Sand Beach is where the fire ended. It didn't go beyond this point. And Sand Beach is the only sandy beach on the ocean in the park. And at low tide, it's a pretty good sized beach. We haven't reached low tide, but we're getting there. And you notice the wet sand up there where those people are, that's generally the high tide mark. And yet we've got another 25 feet to go at least in the beach area to reach mean low tide on a normal day. Of course, you know they're controlled by the moon and so on, and the tides here fluctuate quite a bit, from about 8 feet to up to 15 feet sometimes. That point of land on the other side of the beach is called Great Head, and it has a hiking trail on it. Sometimes we see people standing around on some of the clear areas up there. The beach will be out to the right end of that dark granite on the other side before it's over with. Now, on a hot summer day, in fact, Memorial Day weekend, there were people all over that beach. It was filled. This lane was full of cars all the way down. People park. You can park legally in this lane. That's how many people we had around here on Memorial Day weekend. Now, we'll have that periodically from time to time throughout the whole season. And the beach will be filled with people with a handful in that frigid water, which they say never exceeds 56 degrees, and generally it's colder than that. That guy happens to be right in the wrong spot for me, but I just wanted you to see that little picturesque cliff of pink granite down there. Remember the pink granite on Cadillac? We haven't seen any since we left Cadillac. It's all been gray. And now we pick it up again here. So somehow or another, there's a connection. Cadillac Mountain is back off to the right. And that granite must connect underground somewhere to that pink granite over there.
A big string of it.
Yeah, because that's the only place you'll see it is down here and up there.
Yeah.
When the fire ended, I'm told by one of the local people that a ball of fire left that point over on the left, which is Great Head, and the wind picked that fireball up and threw it all the way out to that little island over there. And there's no pictures of it. Nobody was ready to take a picture. But he said he can remember it flying through the air, a great big ball of fire. That beach, by the way, was featured in a movie scene some years ago that some of you may have seen called Cider House Rules. going to Thunder Hole. We'll stop here for 15 minutes, and it's going to be pretty calm, it looks like. I don't think we're going to really hear much in the way of thunder. Although it's called Thunder Hole. Kind of like the 3 faces of Eve, except I think this has got about 5 faces. And thunder's one of them. Whispering is another one. Gurgling, sloshing, or some others. There is a face to be seen on the side of the big stack of granite that comes into view when you start down the stairway over here on the left. You'll see a big stack of granite on the right. And if you go over to the viewing area off to the left, there's an upper one and a lower one. If you go to the upper one and look right down at Thunder Hole, you can see what looks like an Indian, or some people say it looks like George Washington's profile, jutting out of the side of that cliff. And I say it's the old man from the mountain over in New Hampshire. Fell off a couple of years ago and he came over here.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, it's